My life and political thoughts as a tarot reader who thinks YouTube wants to know what the hell I'm thinking. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anti-Case Tarot. This is the productivity super deduction. Trump names Carney's budget. There's a new budget in so-called Canada, and everyone's waiting to see if it's going to pass, and Carney has named it the productivity super deduction budget. So either Carney has learned to speak Trump faster than he learned to speak French, or Trump named the budget, or he named it to impress Trump. And I bet Trump is jealous or excited because, as previously mentioned, Carney's bills he's been passing this year, they give Trump access to Canadians' privacy, their internet, their mail, and it also steamrolls the environment, Indigenous rights and title, and immigrant rights. And the budget is the same. Carney's productivity super deduction budget took a page from Trump's big beautiful bill. If you make under 250,000, then you got screwed in this budget. Every single cut was for those in the upper tax brackets. Luxury tax cuts included. Want to buy a yacht this year? Cool. Tax cut. Mansion? Tax break. Making hundreds of thousands a year? Have capital gains issue? Tax cut. The middle class, they got a top up, but it's to fix a problem that would have seen them with less this year. So it's holding the middle class steady. I don't know, we're going to really call it a tax cut. For those here for something supernatural, well, like a ghost from the past, the words trickle-down economics are back. Also, trickle-down environmentalism. That's a new one for you. All right, that one's kind of expected because Carney's book does believe capitalism will want to fix the climate. Just not if capitalism is a banker turned politician writing Trump a budget for Canada. Then I didn't foresee environmental gutting, but it happened, and we're told don't worry because trickle down and other lies like carbon capture, but also an interesting thing that was cut is rules around greenwashing. So there was going to be protections that would make it illegal for corporations to greenwash. That is now cut. And you have to if you want to be the prime minister who sells the environment on carbon capture and green natural gas. I guess if it has the word natural, it's clean. All right. So, in celebrating our impending financial doom, I got a budget outfit, and like all the politicians do, except I went to the thrift store. Prices are going up there too, but these were all yellow tags, so I got this outfit: leggings, shift, and sweater for $25. Carney and Trump could both learn a thing about how savings actually work from me. They didn't, so here we are. Okay, at least I look better than both of them. But can we check out Blanchett? His looks from this budget week. I've got 3 of them picked out here. Just to be clear, he's a piece of shit. He's just a well-dressed piece of shit. And the best dressed for budget week. All right, this one here with the red silk lining totally inspired my look. Except I downplayed the gray. Elizabeth May also downplayed the gray, but I think I did it better, way better. This time I look less frumpy than Elizabeth May. I do not always achieve that. All right, that said, she was as bright as her statement, which was that the sacrifices in this budget are not equal. And they were not. Okay, the budget. The fun is over. To the budget. As mentioned, this is a budget for the upper classes and the elite. And it was not something settlers saw coming on the campaign trail, to be fair. Cutting 40,000 jobs, however, it was not a campaign promise, although some did speculate that it was hinted at. And it was. Okay. Services are being cut everywhere. Trump imposed a 10% tariff on almost everyone globally. Carney promised people, don't worry, he'll look after them. And then he imposed 15% cuts to almost every sector of the settler Canadian economy. So much for helping folks through tough times from Trump's tariffs. Instead, there will be service cuts everywhere except to the military, border, cops, and Crown Indigenous Relations, which is having a 2% cut. So, when your job gets cut, be it the government 40,000 that they're cutting, or the cuts to jobs that are likely to come from other budgetary cuts as fallout, such as health and education transfers. All right, so instead of speaking to a human when you're going through these job losses and trying to figure out how to get through life with all these cuts, you get to talk to an AI. Also, don't mess up your taxes because AI will be looking for fraud to help the government save money. Something the rich don't need to bother involving themselves with as much thanks to the budget gifts. These 15% cuts will total $51.2 billion and are meant to offset the $141 billion in spending, which includes the investments of cuts and breaks for the rich and super rich, because trickle down. All right, the budget wasn't just for millionaires and billionaires. It was also for the companies that make people super rich, billionaires and millionaires. Extraction, tech, military, especially military, who got a 40% increase. Okay, that's never happened up here. It's like the most American thing possible. So elbows are down on the bed, propping Carney's head just over Trump's. You get the picture. Also, on top of the 40% increase for the military, Carney wants everything else to be dual use. What is dual use, you ask? It means make it also useful for the military. Why? Because AI. If you haven't heard my AI rants in the past, all of it is useful for the military and security. AI art trains AI for things like visual stuff, including facial recognition, how to identify somebody walking down a street by their gait. That's what you're helping when you use it. Did your cool meme or thumbnail help Israel shoot a toddler or help ICE beat up a grandfather? Maybe. Okay, military is getting $81.8 billion on a cash basis. What does that mean? I was pretty curious what that meant, and I had some pretty fantastic ideas, but apparently it's just means cash payments are made as expenses are incurred in acquiring the ship, as detailed in Graph B. So that's an excerpt from Annex A Financial Transparency in 2019 from a Government on Canada Defense Policy website. So not actually a big deal. But 81.8 billion is a pretty big deal. It's in Chapter 4, titled Protecting Canada's Sovereignty and Security. But as they ask on the breach, protect from who? The only threat towards Canada is the USA, and the budget is not protecting from them.
This used to be called military Keynesianism. We're seeing, in many ways, Canada follow what has been happening in the UK and Germany, which is devote a huge amount of their public spending to building out their militaries. And the question has to be asked, against what enemies?
Right.
I think a lot of people are afraid of Donald Trump's saber rattling and then the economic tariffs that he's imposed on the country, his threats about, potentially annexing us. I do think that if that were to ever come to pass, there's no military response to that. There's no way that we can, fend off the power of the U.S. military.
Nor really are these proposals a serious plan to prepare for that.
Exactly. So I think rhetorically, Carney's playing into that. And I do think that kind of military Keynesianism, this effort to claim to be, developing our productivity and having trickle-down effects for Canadians is utter folly. For one thing, every dollar of spending in the military and on weapons creates far fewer jobs than if they were to spend that money in healthcare, in environmental spending, in education. If we're at all concerned about the climate crisis as well, the militaries are the biggest institutional emitters of carbon emission.
That's a lot of money to jump through NATO hoops Trump is demanding, and a lot of money that is not actually helping jobs. Build the Golden Dome for Trump, buy weapons, all of which Americans will have access to, as they do now. Just try and find a Canadian base that doesn't have American military personnel on it. You can't. And also, did you know the Canadian military are currently with the Americans in the Caribbean bombing fishing boats, just like they have been with American troops participating in the genocide in Gaza. All right, AI. It gets money from a bunch of different places. So what's forward-facing is artificial intelligence, 225.6 million, quantum tech, domestic, 334.3 million, research chairs, 1 billion, PH and postdoc, 133.6 million, Canada Foundation for Innovation, 400 million, for a total of 2.793 billion. But that's not actually all the AI. It's sprinkled everywhere. For example, there's 25 million to StatsCan Tech Stat Program. AI Compute Access Fund has 300 million for AI. National Research AI Assist Program is getting 10.5 million. Canadian AI Safety Institute is getting 50 million. There's probably more. I read a lot of the budget. I did not read the nearly 500 pages. All right, here's an excerpt from the start of Chapter 5 of the budget, though, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. There's also hidden, we don't know. Budget 2025 introduces new measures to make federal programs and services more effective and focused. This includes results from the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, a government-wide exercise to reduce duplication and inefficiencies and realign activities towards the core federal mandate. Kind of sounds like Doge. It's been happening quietly, and its impacts are in this budget. Okay, continuing on with the quote. Greater efficiency will allow resources to be directed towards increasing public service productivity and improving how services are delivered to Canadians, particularly through the integration of technology and artificial intelligence, AI. End of quote. So chapter 5 is about cuts to social programs and government employees. We get told here how much is going to be saved, but like not what the remaining amount is being spent on, although we get told like the savings happen because we're cutting things and replacing with AI. So there's money that's already allocated to certain services that will now become AI money, and those figures are unclear. All right. Then there is the extraction in energy, and that too is about spending on AI. And military, who will also be using AI. Yeah, you guessed it. Oh, and sovereign cloud for Canada to save all your info on for increased government surveillance. Even the northern infrastructure, which is part of Indigenous spending, is dual use for military. Which is why the big highway they are building isn't going to benefit most northern communities, just a few, because it's going to benefit the ports that are being created for northern shipping with continued glacial melting. I said during Harper's time when I was protesting and doing speeches that, it feels like Harper's doing this in hopes of global warming and melting ice caps. Okay. So AFN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanek talks about hoping the $1 billion can go to a different road project, but that it seems unlikely. Even the water and sewage is welcome, but everyone knows it's only happening now that white people will be living there for extraction and military with new bases coming. So the two groups most known for killing and raping Indigenous people of all ages, including toddlers, is coming to the most Indigenous regions that we have up here. And apparently we need to become dual use with these people. Words, they always set the tone, don't they? AFN National Chief talks about the lack of education and broken promises made during the campaign in this area. The AFN National Chief also mentions, with the disgust of anybody talking about Reagan and Thatcher, the trickle-down economics that is mentioned many times, because that's also what Indigenous communities are getting. Trickle-down. Carney said during the campaign that assuring Indigenous communities have proper housing, water, sewage, and access to the internet would result in a good offset from the losses of Trump's tariffs, and so it was worth investing in. But instead, we get trickle down from when they send in the military and extraction for AI. The military is going to come in using AI. They're going to be setting up data centers. They're going to be extracting massively from Indigenous communities. They're going to be putting in ports. They're going to be changing, like, there's communities who fish on the Arctic Ocean, and now there's going to be shipping and military ports, which means military exercises and military pollution, and the tundra is defrosting, and all of this will be about extracting minerals for AI in communities that don't have internet access. AFN National Chief also talks about the fight to get a 2% reduction instead of 15%. The breach also mentions that there are groups that fought the cuts all summer. Indigenous rights groups, Climate Youth Corps saved a pilot project for $40,000 million, and two LGBTQIA and feminist groups protected cuts to wage women and gender equity. Disability activists also prevented cuts to Canada Disability. That needs to be mentioned. All right. Manitoba AFN Regional Chief Willie Moore mentions it's the first time we as Indigenous people are mentioned in the budget, like in our own section. There's always an Indigenous section. There's not. Interestingly, it is also the first time immigrants have been mentioned in the budget, and they are mentioned as a problem to be managed. They are a scapegoat in the budget for housing, education, affordability, and health. And most disgusting of all, immigrants and migrants will no longer have access to health care in Canada and are going to have to pay for it, further instituting a multi-tiered health system.
Speaking about the budget, we talked about, there's no new funding for Jordan's principal, healthcare, education, sunsetting programs, there's no mention as to if they're going to be renewed at all. The only new funding specifically that is announced for Indigenous people is the 2.3 for freshwater and then 10 million for major projects. What is this telling you about how the Carney government is viewing the relationship with First Nations?
Well, certainly it doesn't create further trust that's needed at this time, right? I know that the government has come and asked our chiefs, throughout the summer, just trust us. We're going to get there together. But our gaps that we've experienced for a long time, for probably since the creation of this country, and the taking of all of our always one side benefiting from the extraction of our lands. And it's First Nations lands from coast to coast to coast, no matter where you are. I know that that's an uncomfortable truth that Canada wants to ignore, but it is the truth.
Military, cops, border security, AI, and the wealthy got the best budget ever in this productivity super deduction. Productivity super deduction. Carney even brags about how he makes it even easier for foreign companies to invest in Canada than investing in the USA, with even bigger, more beautiful productivity super deduction cuts. The super deductions are paid for by the poor and working classes. Welcome to the AI feudal hell. Shit. I didn't even get to the big green line. So yeah, greenwashing is allowed, starting with carbon capture, green natural gas, and mining for data centers that will use up all your water and electricity. But it's okay, because Canada is also investing in nuclear power to power the data centers for Canada's sovereign AI and cloud with dual military use. The water might also be dual use for the mining and data centers, aka quantum tech.
I know this country wants to build, build, baby, build? Isn't that their motto?
An excellent question from a reporter. Okay.
Yeah, so the mining companies, they're going to need roads, they're going to need railways, they're going to need electricity, sometimes natural gas if they're going to do refining. So they're going to be looking for all that infrastructure to bring in. And First Nations don't have those things. So is this going to just create more pressure on First Nations to make deals, because that's where the infrastructure is going to come from negotiating with companies and getting some kind of dual use instead of from government?
Well, the federal government has a fiduciary responsibility, and
the rest of that statement's boring. So let me answer that for you. Are Indigenous folks going to be forced to deal? And it is a good question. The budget includes 10.1 million, 25.5 billion, and 41.7. Sorry. The budget includes 10.1 million, 25.5 million, and 41.7 million for various initiatives on consultation and development with Indigenous communities. Consultation is not consent. And even though Canada acts like it is, there's even more money to help force us into agreements with an additional 213.8 million if we participate in major projects, which is things like natural gas, mining, oil. So it seems like Carney foresees forcing Indigenous communities to deal through economic ransom. Oh, and the housing he promised, that's going to be tax breaks on affordable, aka 250,000+ homes, and housing projects from which he hopes developers will trickle down and include some social housing and co-op housing. That's the budget. That's the budget. Please don't think voting is going to fix us. Go mobilize, build programs that don't rely on funding. Thank you. All right. Do we want some cards for that? I bet we do. Just give me a minute. You can choose a tarot message from the African Tizama Tarot. The Star Wars Tarot. Or the Fifth Spirit Tarot. Okay. Let's see what we got. Page of Cups, King of Cups, Ace of Swords. As you move through this, remember that a number of the cuts rely on emotional manipulation. Trickle down economics is all about blaming the poor. This budget blames the poor. Please go out there and feel with your cup. Give of yourself. Find places to help. Mutual aid, ideal. You're also going to need to do classic things like food banks, but you know, if you lived in a mixed community, especially, like get community meals going. All right. All right. Hermit, Justice, Page of Swords. Justice is coming down. Brutal. Do not deal with it by being the hermit. you might be uncertain. You might think you're not worthy of wielding a weapon that's a sword, words. The sword represents words as much as weapons, and words can be a weapon as well. And so I'm going to go with that, but this does feel like it's about words. Don't think you're not worthy of speaking your words. They are needed to find groups and to lead and encourage people to stand up against these injustices, and you can't do that on your own. Okay. Fifth, spirit. Two of Cups, becomes the Moon, becomes the Five of Cups. Tough times increase domestic violence. As we're figuring out all the people who need help, remember that people suffering from domestic violence are in need of help. People who don't have coping skills need coping skills so that they don't become dangerous to the people they care about. So these things need to be considered and are also very important if we want to build a new world. All right, those are the readings today, and what you can do to find somewhere to direct your mind when dealing with the budget. So there you have it. Talk to you later, folks.